This is Caitlin Clarkson Pereira from Connecticut, and you're listening to a fellow former candidate for elected office and a forever Wonder Woman, MJ Hegar, on Two Broads Talking Politics.
Welcome back to another episode of Two Broads Talking Politics. As usual, I am one of your co-hosts, Sophie, and I am here with your other co-host, Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Hello.
And today we are thrilled to be joined by MJ Hegar. She was a candidate for Texas's 31st Congressional District in 2018, and you may recognize her from her viral campaign video, Doors. Welcome, MJ.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. I know, as I mentioned, I think a lot of our listeners will know the basics of your story, but could you just sort of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you ended up running and sort of where that desire to run came from?
Sure, yeah. So I was raised here in my home district since I was 7 in Texas, in North Austin area. And I, went off into the military, had a 12-year military career that culminated in being a rescue helicopter pilot. In my third tour, I was shot down while on a medevac mission and had to engage the enemy in ground combat, which actually everybody got out alive and everything was okay. It was a really dramatic story, though, and there was a lot of media attention on it because of the dramatic nature of the story. And frankly, I was extremely introverted, but I recognized early on that I needed to use the platform that I was given to talk about the issues that were important to me. So I used that to talk about things like PTSD and veteran homelessness and military sexual assault and things like that. And so I gradually got better at speaking in public and speaking to the media. And then the ACLU came to me and said, we don't think it's constitutional that women are barred from serving in ground combat. And I was like, well, I served in ground combat, and then I realized that there was a job that I wanted to apply for after I could no longer fly due to some injuries that I couldn't apply for because I was a woman. And, it started dawning on me that it was really hurting the military. So I joined with the ACLU to sue the Department of Defense, but it was really more of a partnership because they wanted to repeal the policy too. I think it was a unanimous recommendation from the Joint Chiefs to repeal it. So we repealed that, but through that process, as soon as the policy was repealed, the senator from Alabama at the time was Jeff Sessions, and he said he was going to legislate the policy back in place. So I co-founded an organization called the Combat Integration Initiative, and we went up to the Hill in D.C. and met with members and senators and staffers, and I learned a lot about how D.C. works, and a lot of it was really gross. There were things said to me like, you're not on our donor list. You don't have any political capital to give my boss, why would my boss support you? And it struck me that that's not how it should work. Meanwhile, I was working for 5 years in the healthcare industry after I got out of the military while I was going through all of this. So those things, like my national security expertise that I gained in the military, my understanding of our unsustainable healthcare model, and my experience in D.C., kind of led me to, in 2018, I'm assessing the tools in my toolkit and trying to figure out how I can help my country the most. And I took a look at our, congressman who is a do-nothing kind of representative who most people don't even recognize his name and wasn't doing anything to help, was not there to help me when I needed him. I voted for him, by the way, in the past. And I just decided to run against him. I just think that the country was going in the wrong direction, and I needed to do something about the future for my boys. They're 2 and 4. So that's what I did. And, he won his last midterm by 32 points, and we lost our race by 2.9. So, the district's ready for a change, and, the message really resonated with people.
So I have to ask you the question that we ask all Democrats now. Are you running for president?
I think I'm supposed to say I'm currently assessing all of my options, and that closes the door on anything. No, I am not running for president. There's few things I can say with certainty, and that's one of them.
So you did this incredible job in your campaign and really closed that gap, came really close in a district that a lot of people thought of as a total long shot. What are some of the sort of takeaways for you in terms of, both maybe your own personal takeaways from that race, but also kind of what you think Democrats and women in general can be thinking about?
Yeah, I think that I read a story in the Washington Post that really hit the nail on the head, and it was talking about how there's more that separates the political class from the average American than there is that separates the left from the right. And I do think that's the biggest problem. We have a system, a political system set up to where, I'm not independently wealthy. I had to quit my job to run for Congress because it's a full-time job to do it right. And it nearly hobbled my family financially. So we have this political system that doesn't support mothers, that doesn't support working people, and that leads to a majority of elected officials being completely out of touch with the actual challenges that everyday working American families face. And they're charged with legislating solutions to those problems that they've never faced. How do we have people, legislating on affordable health care when they've never had to worry about where their health care comes from? Obviously, that's not all of them. So that's, I would say, the majority of them. So I really think that more emphasis needs to be placed on getting a group of elected officials that is more reflective of the electorate, both in demographics and in experience. So, my takeaway was that I was so successful because I was genuine. I'm not a politician. I'm not like a used car salesman who's going to promise you things. There were things that would have made it a lot easier on me if I had said, but I wasn't willing to say because they weren't in line with my values. And, I think if we can seek out those people and be less divisive and just try to support candidates that are really fighting for people and not trying to pad their resume or their ego, but actually trying to serve their communities, then I think that we would be better served as a country for that.
We talked about this a little bit before, but can you tell us, you didn't win your race, but you came very close. And so I imagine there are some things that you feel like sort of came out of your win. Like what sorts of positive change do you see in the district as a result of you running for Congress?
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that in the 2016 election, I was talking to a group of people. It was the primary season, and I was talking to a group of people about the various, options on the ballot on both sides. And somebody said to me, well, what state are you from? This was in New York City. And I said, Texas. And I said, oh, well, then your vote doesn't matter. Mm. And that really struck me, like that's an actual thing, that some people think, if you come from a red or a blue area, your vote doesn't matter. And Texas in particular is a very independent-minded state. We don't like being told, that we're predictable or that we have to think a certain way. We like to think of ourselves as different from the rest of the country. We are the Lone Star State. We fly our flag even with the American flag. And my kids have to say the Texas Pledge of Allegiance right after the American Pledge of Allegiance. It's a unique state, and my district self-identifies as 1/3 independent. You would think of us as this overwhelming Republican area, but it's not true. I would argue that the people in this area, because I've lived here since I was 7, and I think this describes me too, are not affiliated with one party or the other, but will vote along the lines of being fiscally responsible and relatively socially liberal. And so who does that describe? It's really a party for us. We pick candidates that we think are in line with that. And I think a lot of the people around here who consider themselves Republicans are Republicans because they're pro-military and because they're fiscally conservative. And they see the current Republican elected officials. I don't like to say the Republican Party because I think that paints a really broad brush to all the Republican voters. But they look at their elected officials and they don't see their values reflected back. But maybe they look at the Democratic elected officials and they're concerned that that's a little, far left from what they were raised with, a little, not fiscally conservative enough. So who do you vote for? Do you go third party, libertarian, independent? It's difficult. You offer Texas a candidate that is reflective of their values, that believes in strong small business, that believes in states' rights, that there is a place for federal government, and that we believe that people shouldn't go without access to affordable health care. We believe that we want to secure the Second Amendment, but we also don't want to have mass shootings become part of our normal everyday life. We believe in, background checks and things like that. So I mean, I don't think that most Texans fit nicely into a political bucket, and Texans need to be given candidates that are reflective of their values. But some of the things that I think came out of my election that I'm really proud of are that more people will run for office instead of feeling like it's impossible to run unless you were a Republican, you know, because people told me when we started that it was impossible. I think more people will vote instead of thinking that their votes don't count. More people will pay attention. You know, we had presidential cycle level voter engagement and voting levels in the midterm, which is great. And it's a great sign for the presidential election coming up. I think people understand how important it is.
We recently talked to Luba Gretchen Shirley from Vote Mama, and I know you've been in touch with that organization as well. Can you talk a little bit about running for office with really young kids? I know a lot of us are thinking a lot more about that. Like, maybe I don't have to wait till my kids are grown up to run for office, but I'm sure that it presents some challenges.
It did. You know, I think it depends on your support system. For me, it was the reason I was running. I almost resented my kids a little because I couldn't just put my head in the stands like I wanted to and stop paying attention to the world. I had to actually try to do something about climate change because I'm terrified about the world that they're growing up into. And, you know, I think that our kids are the reason we do this, not a reason to stop us from doing this. Certainly the system's not set up to support women like me. And you know, certainly the system treats women with small kids much different than men with small kids. There was somebody who was running for office in Texas who had a baby like during their cycle, during the election cycle. And nobody ever asked him when I appeared with him, you know, what it's like to have small kids or how is he caring for his kids and things like that. You know, I would not have been able to do it if I didn't have a great support system. My mom lives in my district. My husband is an amazing partner and father. And, you know, I brought my kids with me everywhere. And I would thank other people that brought their kids. Instead of them being disruptive, I saw it as an opportunity to remind people why we're fighting. I think we need to normalize kids being around more, both for business and politics. And, you know, I have pictures of myself standing in front of a crowd of 100 people holding the microphone, holding Daniel, my youngest, on my hip. He was 5 months when I started this campaign. I was still breastfeeding when I started this campaign. My 4-year-old, we were always very cautious to like protect the children from any negativity or anything like that, and to only let them see like the good stuff. And I'm super proud of this little story that we were at a meeting where different candidates were giving their stump speeches, and I got up and spoke and sat down, and my 3-year-old was being unusually loud. And so I was kind of like trying to shush him. And I was like, honey, what do you need? What can mommy give you? What can I bribe you with to get you to be quiet? You know, and he said, Mommy, I want the microphone. I have something to say. And he slid off his little chair and started marching up to the front. It was the cutest thing I've ever seen. Of course, I had to scoop him up, run back to the back of the room. And I was like, honey, that's right. You know, when you have something to say, don't you ever let someone silence you. Now go with Daddy out to the parking lot and tell him all about it, whatever it is. You know? But I was so proud because I felt like, you know, I'm raising these kids to stand up for themselves and to speak out when they have something to say. So, you know, it was an interesting experience. It was difficult, but most things that are worth it are going to be difficult.
Yeah, I love that. My kids I've said this before on here, but my kids have been begging me to run for office.
How old are they?
7 and 4, 2 boys.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're like, well, you'd be really good. You'd be better than the president.
Aww,
well, you know.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet. And my 4-year-old now is saying that he's going to run for Congress someday, but there is another side of that coin. You know, after the election, I immediately, you know, like I said, I didn't have the financial flexibility to go without a job. So I immediately started looking for a job. And he thought he was going to get me all to himself. I started looking for a job. And he said to me once, see, my husband calls me Mary. So my son knows my name is Mary, but he also knows my like professional name is MJ. And so he said to me, but I thought you were done being MJ. I just want you to be my mommy. Oh. And it broke my heart. So there's good moments and then there's tough moments. Sure. You know, but I think most working moms have to face that.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but you're kind of a big deal. You have a bunch of, military medals. You have a Purple Heart. You have all these awards. You wrote a book. You wrote a memoir called Shoot Like a Girl. I think you were on Fresh Air. I mean, you're kind of a big deal. You had this viral video that I'm not exaggerating when I say every person on my Facebook from every place in the country saw that video. Yeah. So, how do you sort of deal with being such a big deal? What is it like? And sort of how do you reconcile that into your sort of personal life?
Well, so I think it's so important when you're representing big ideas that it's really the ideas that I'm representing that are a big deal. Like when I was fighting for opening jobs for women, getting, awards and Newsweek magazines, Women of Impact, and Foreign Policy magazines, leading global thinkers on the list with Malala Yousafzai and Angela Merkel and the Pope, and it was really surreal. And as long as you remember that it's actually not MJ Hegar that's on the list. It's the women that I'm representing. It's a group of women who are fighting for equality that's being recognized, and I'm happy to step forward and represent them, and you know what I mean, be the face of whatever that group is. And I think that we talked about this a little bit off the air, that the candidates who buy their own hype are in for a difficult time. My kids certainly keep me humble. My husband does as well, in the nicest way. I mean, I get recognized out and about, and that's fun and bad, because I am still an introvert, and I do have small kids, and we did have a bad experience on Halloween where some John Carter supporters were pelting my kids with candy, and so I don't love being recognized. I also joke that I can't go get my breakfast tacos in my pajamas anymore because I work from home. So, you lose a little bit of freedom. But, I think that the good thing is that when the checked out, girl at HEB says, "Oh my God, you're MJ, I loved your video," it's an opportunity for me to say, "Oh, great. Well, thank you for the support. Get involved with the campaign," or, "Hey, I'm on the board of the Texas Advocacy Project, and it's great." It's just a chance to get people involved. I think that people don't get involved in their communities enough sometimes because they don't think one person can make a big difference. And it's true that you can. What I'm doing right now, if you don't mind me talking about that for a minute,
sure.
On the campaign trail, there were a couple things that I encountered that just kept me up at night. Probably the biggest one is the migrant family separation at the border. But another big one was pharmaceutical pricing. I had people stop me on the campaign trail in tears, literally multiple times. I could think of 4 right now. I'm sure there were more that would say things like, "My wife has a terminal diagnosis, but she has stopped taking her meds and accepted 2 months to live instead of 6 because she doesn't want to bankrupt the family on her way out." Or, it was heartbreaking. And it's a topic that gets some attention. It was in the State of the Union, but it's not like as sexy and popular of a topic as some of the other political topics out there. So when I finished the campaign and I was looking for a way to wake up in the morning with that feeling that I'm fighting for people, I chose to work with a company called Hippo that people who are listening can learn more about at hellohippo.com. And it sounds too good to be true, but it's saving people up to 97% on their prescriptions for free. It's a free, you don't have to sign up with this long, account creation or anything like that. You just text hello to Hippo, which is 44776. They send you a card. You show that card to your pharmacist, and you save a ton of money on prescriptions. So I'm really excited to be still fighting for people, even though I'm not running for office.
So that's a segue. do you think you might run for office again someday? You don't have to tell us for sure, but do you think the possibility is open?
I know I sound like a commercial, but it's my mission in life to tell as many people about this as possible because of how many people leave their prescriptions at the pharmacy. It's hard to say that I'll go run for something when I feel so fulfilled by what I'm doing now, and I do feel like I'm helping a lot of people. But, I also recognize that I have some assets like name recognition and a fundraising, structure that's already set up and a lot of experience that's going to make me a much better candidate than I was as more of a beginner. And, I have to look at what's best for my family, and then first, obviously, and then second, I have to look at my toolkit again and see what's the best way I can serve my community. Right now, it's trying to help people save on their prescriptions. someday, maybe even this cycle, it might be, okay, I've done everything I can to spread the word on that. Now maybe I'll run for something. So, I mean, I'm not really closing the door on any options right now, but I would say that a lot of things will have to fall into place. A lot of dominoes would have to fall into place perfectly for me to run for office again. And, there's different offices that I'm considering. So me and my team are kind of, bouncing ideas around and thinking about the pros and cons and where do we see the urgency? Where do we see the fire? Where do we run with the bucket?
You mentioned that you are an introvert, and I would say the number one reason I hear people tell me for why they can't run for office is because they're introverted, and this includes me. Do you have any tips for introverts who might want to run for office one day?
Yeah, don't believe what people say about introverts. And also, I face this a lot. Don't let people get away with bullying you into, you're not an introvert. Look at how well, how articulate you are. Look, you give speeches to thousands of people. Don't let people tell you who you are. I am incredibly, extremely, on the Myers-Briggs, I'm a 26 introvert and a 0 extrovert, which is unusual. Usually you fall somewhere on the scale. And all that means has nothing to do with what you're good at and everything to do with what you're comfortable with and how you recharge your battery. I read a book called Quiet, and I can't remember the author, but it was really great and helped me learn about myself. And there's so many people like Robin Williams and Al Gore and, a lot of people out there that are really, really, really introverted, and understanding what challenges come with that. For example, the book Quiet was talking about how Al Gore was so surprised that people didn't just accept the climate change science, because as an introvert, he just processes data and doesn't really think about, the personal side of it as much. Understanding your challenges and how you need to craft your communication style is important, but I would say even more important is understanding your strengths. And there is strength that comes with being an introvert. I know that if I'm speaking, it's not because I want attention, because I actually hate it when all eyes are on me or when cameras are pointed at me. So I know that if I am speaking, it's because I am, convinced that I am trying to make a difference on something. So, my advice would just be to read that book for sure, but to also just be very mindful of your, challenges, but your strengths. So many people spend so much time trying to overcome their challenges and not really utilizing their strengths. And practice, I would say, when I started off, this is a good example of why I say I'm not a politician, because most people wouldn't talk about stuff like this, but that's usually the red flag where my campaign manager at the back of the room starts waving his hands and going, no, don't say whatever you're about to say. When I first started in 2009, after the shoot down, and I started talking to the media about the shoot down and such, or if I had to go give a speech, I literally had to drink a rum and Diet Coke before I could do it. I was so terrified. And then when the lawsuit was filed, I had to go on MSNBC with Alex Witt, and the car came for me at 4 a.m. for a 6 a.m. hit time. And my poor husband is in the back of the town car mixing a vodka and orange juice for me. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I have to be able to do this without taking a drink of something. I'm certainly not a drinker. So I had to get to a point where that, wasn't true. And so practicing getting in front of people and talking, being an introvert is different than having a fear of public speaking, but definitely practicing joining Toastmasters or just, finding an excuse to get in front of people to speak is important.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. I think we should start a series called Conversations with Kick-Ass Women, because, Well,
if I know any, I'll send them your way. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate y'all having me on and helping me spread the word.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put links up for Hippo and a link to your book as well, so people can check that out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Westland and was created for use by this podcast.